Switched on, are we, Laura? Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Governance and Resources meeting on the 25th of November 2024. Any apologies?
Good evening, members. I have apologies from Councillors Thompson and Wright.
And I might, if I've got a rehearsal tonight, I might leave earlier, depending how interesting you all are.
Yeah. Thank you. Item 2, interest on as and when. Item 3, the minutes of our last meeting. I'm sure you've all glanced at them. So we're not really going to go through every page, but any questions from last month's, well, September's? Take that as a no, so I'm going to propose the minutes. I've got a second to Councillor Creek. All in favour? That's everybody, thank you. I'll let the clerk do matters arising. He's got a list there for us, thank you.
Yep, so on IBABs there should be a list of some outstanding actions. I'll quickly go through some of them. So the pending actions, we've got the valuation and market rental of Mount Wise Centre. So I think Anne has updated. I don't know whether you want to read that out, actually, Anne. Be easier.
Yeah, sure, I can just update you. Just to say that the current leases within the Mount Wise Centre, there can be no price increases until they're renewed at the end of the lease. But any new lease that comes in will have that price increase on an annual basis within it.
Thank you. Next item is the IBABs issues.
Yep, so IBABs issue. So Will, our IT manager, has successfully, I believe, tested a new approach, albeit I've just noted another issue that I think Councillor Larson may have stumbled upon, so we'll raise that with Will. But effectively everyone needs to re-download the app and then re-log in, and then hopefully those changes will apply.
The one confusion was that you couldn't, the original setup, you couldn't see any of the papers, and so I don't know what he did, but the top, if you get this, you click the top line, not the published agenda, and that will give you the agenda with all the attachments.
And then the next item, which was closed down, is the corporate plan amendments have now been adopted by full council. The item after that was around the pop-ups in the Killicourt units. I understand Joe is working on some red lines and presenting via email to the ENF committee some suggestions on that, and we have a tenancy at will ready to go. So that should be something we can turn around quite quickly, hopefully. And then the National Lottery bid, which is sitting with our grants officer. The key here was to keep Councillor Thompson informed. I believe that's happening, and so that project is progressing well. And that's it.
Just one very quick question, Andy. On the Killicourt pop-up units, the lease, will that require the same 2-week calling off period that the long-term leases require?
I don't believe so, because I think we're using either a licence or a tenancy at will, and there's a different requirement there.
Just remind me what we're asking for what and how, roughly how much.
So if the units are empty, say particularly around Christmas, somebody might want to rent one for a week. So it was that sort of thing. But at the moment, I think we've only got one. They're all filled bar one. I think. Yeah.
You need a national lottery bid for that.
Oh no, the national lottery bid is totally different.
That's what I was asking.
Sorry. Okay.
So it might be better if Anne updates on that one. Sorry.
The national lottery bid is for the is that the library one? Because we've got a library bid as well as the climate action group bid, and I believe that particular one is for that, and that's just to say that there is an application. And he sent an email out, I think, earlier this week or late last week to all the members to say ENF had asked for a presentation, just an update on it, to all committee members, full council, and that because the application deadline had been delayed until the spring, that they would do that in the new year. So there'll be an invite to everybody that explains it in a lot of detail. So that's what that relates to. But that's what he's working on.
Like fixing the roof or something like that is what we're after.
Oh no, it's a big project. It's £1.5 million potentially for engaging with the local community about environmental issues and trying to make people aware and engaged. So it's all around the climate action for Newquay and the future.
Forget, don't you? Who took my double one that I could keep it on? So you have the grant application in front of you. Matt's given us a presentation. So obviously I'm happy to propose, from my perspective, I'm happy to support the bid. I'll let you all. Councillor Quick, Councillor Larson.
In ENF, we had 3
They're
presentations.
totally separate though. These are separate committees.
Well, my question is that I thought that one of those applications is coming to this committee as well. And so what is the total amount that we have versus the number of applications is basically my question.
Okay, so there's 3 more later on in the agenda that have come from different committees, or I think it might even be just ENF actually. And that's coming out of the earmark reserves. So they're not touching the grants revenue budget, which is controlled by this committee. So the recommendations that I've seen that are on the agenda are all earmark reserve release recommendations. So the budget that this committee has, it can cope with the full amount that's been required here, or requested here, sorry. And there's another application in the moment for the cricket club, and that I believe is for £900. Again, that can be fully funded from the revenue budget for this committee.
How much have we got at the moment?
Yeah,
£4,000.
£4,000.
About 3.5, and we still have 1,000. We'll still have 1,000 left.
Sorry, I thought we were supposed to be trying not to use earmark reserves. That's why I'm looking confused.
At the point that ENF met, there was only one application that we had, and what the ENF said is that they would ask GNR to consider any underspend that they had within there, and then look at earmark reserves for the grants if there wasn't enough.
That's left over could help fund, but that total needed from the other committee is 2,500. Is that right, or is it 5,000?
So, GNR's budget for funding is 5,000 in total for the whole year. We've used, I think it was more than that. I think we've used 1,000. I will double check that, and then I'll just check my notes quickly. And then that was what this committee had their 2.5, which is this half of the budget, this year's budgets, to look at how they wish to spend. And then,
Yeah, sorry, and just for Katie, context, just as a reminder, there was an issue where a mistake had been made, and we, rather than sending those people away without the opportunity to apply or accept, eventually get the grant that they were looking for, having applied for, and agreed to come and present to us, we agreed that actually we could use, or recommend to GNR that we could hopefully use some of the underspend for the year, given that this is the second grant window of the year, and any additional would we would recommend that it come out of the recommend to GNR to consider to come out of the
Makes total
EMR.
sense. It's the coming out of the EMR.
Well, that's what we agreed at the committee meeting.
So that we're basically saying 1,500 will.
But let's not go over that now, because I'm conscious that the matter at hand is
It
9A.
affects. whether,
But we've got a grant here that we're discussing.
Yeah.
It's P&R's responsibility in that respect.
I think Anne wants to come in.
Sorry.
Can I make a suggestion? Within this year's budget, there is £5,000 for youth, and that is money that this committee could spend, and that might very well help towards your grant funding for this and for the other projects to cover them.
I think did we not use that the other night at C&T? Or was that in C&T's budget? They're two separate. Anyway, I think we should talk about the Nuki Surf Life Saving.
I'm happy to second again, got a seconder. It's a good project and we have the funding and I couldn't care less if anybody else is trying to steal our money, so I would happily second that.
I'm being rubbish with my mic, apologies. This is for your consideration. It has year to date up till the end of September. The items in red are where the variances are and the explanations. There are a couple of notes in red down the sides for your information about where things are yet to be paid or they are in relation to the over or underspend. So if you have any questions.
Any questions for Anne, Councillor Kenny?
In very simple terms, what sort of percentage of our budget have we spent? This is the most expensive half year apart from Christmas lights, I would have thought.
For this budget,
Yes. Well, what are we on target? What's an overall percentage of what was?
so we are, if you look at your year-to-date actuals and your budget, then we're £71,000 under what our budget is. They're mainly around the fact we've got additional income in here for seal receipts of 56,000 and the contingency. And that again isn't a fair representation because the budget for the contingency is put in here and then at the end of the year allocated across the other departments as it's used. So in terms of where you are for current spend, you're pretty much exactly where you should be for this time of year.
just ask the line 27, 12,000 more than expected, and it says car phone charges? Does anyone have any idea? It just seems maybe there's something complex to it, but it's...
Well, it just lists a couple of things. The things in red are things that need to be allocated. Some of them, that one particular, is wrong coded. It shouldn't be on that line, so I need to move it.
I think maybe it's the server data recovery.
But yeah, so the data recovery, as you will be aware, was a £5,000 bill, and there were some other elements that we have had in addition with IT over the last financial year that we have also agreed to fund. There is also a £10,000 release for IT every year as well from the EMR.
We do have a presentation that was given to members in an informal setting. I wasn't proposing to go through it again because it's been on IBABS since that meeting, but happy to do that if members wish. There's obviously headline figures and some information that Anne's going to be presenting. I am conscious that I think the E&F committee didn't recommend a budget, and so that's causing a bit of an issue in terms of process, because ideally you'd have had every committee's recommended budget by now. And I'm also conscious there's a number of members away in January, so we can't have a January budget meeting on the dates that have been suggested, and hence why we've had to bring this back to a December timeframe, which we believe is achievable, but it is hooked on, you know, the decisions tonight and whether full council is satisfied with those recommendations. So that's kind of the context, really, and obviously Anne can go through. I think the structure that I've laid out here for members is we go through the GNR committee budget first, then we go into the overall GNR, HR, E&F, C&T, P&L. If there's any specific questions on the staffing side, so why is there an increase in staffing, there is a separate breakdown of why that is, but we would need to go into exempt for that bit. So I'm just conscious that's where we need to be if we need to talk about staffing. Okay.
So,
Can I just explain, if I may, Chair? You're saying E&F haven't spent their budget, haven't set their budget. Well, they have done it by the 8th, what date is it, in December?
So the E&F committee looked at their budget numbers, and I think they said that they wanted officers to go away and make some more additional changes and then present it back to the committee. And then they wanted at the next meeting or an extraordinary meeting. Yes. But the timeline to get it to this meeting, which is the meeting we've always hit every year, it wouldn't have worked. It's not possible. The agenda goes out a week before. So that's not been possible. So what we've done is presented their budget as it was suggested at their meeting. So all the changes that they proposed have been included in their budget, and that's what's presented to members. And also the HR committee also was in court. So we presented their budget as they talked about, and in that meeting, those present did say that they were happy or were prepared to recommend those figures. So I'm conscious there's two committees that officially have not recommended their budgets at the moment, but there appears, on the face of it, a majority view of supporting the numbers as they're reflected here.
If we then go ahead and recommend the budget in December, if they decide they want more tough.
Some of the figures we didn't have, so that was all that we asked Anne to go.
I think just for context, there was some revenue lines that we felt were a little cautious on Anne's part, and some overhead expenditure lines that were again a bit over the top. So so we asked the officers to go away and amend those, knowing what we know, and so I think the general consensus in the room was that if we did those things, we would be happy to proceed. We just weren't able to do that in the time of the meeting live with Anne trying to do that. So, and presumably we would have to vote that in after the fact at the next E&F meeting anyway.
Yeah, I mean, as chair of HR, although we were in quorum, the budget was pretty lightweight and non-contentious, so we're pretty confident that the rest of the HR working party, subcommittee, whatever it's called, won't have any issues with that budget. It was pretty unanimous on the day. We just couldn't formalise it.
GNR budget first, is that correct? Yeah. Sorry. Well, I'm looking at the GNR budget. I don't see any major increases, just a small increase on IT software. Everything else seems to be just, and a contract services for 8,000 that wasn't there before. Is anyone able to explain that? It's line 39, sorry.
It was there last year. It was the first year we did have that previously. So the blue numbers, so that wasn't there the previous year.
This year it's a 0.
No,
The budget's 8.8 for this year. We
It's
didn't
this-
spend any of it.
Yes. Does anyone know what it is, why we didn't spend it, why we do some years and
yes,
not others?
so
Sorry.
this is contract services for IT support, and we have used it, but it is allocated amongst software support, IT software support and things. This is things that SciTech have done for us and was part of the package with our new IT manager. That's why it's separated out.
So presumably, if it's no spend this year, we'll be 8,000 or whatever it is under.
Well,
Is that money going to reserve, or is it disappearing into the ether, or what?
if you look at the IT support, when we in subscriptions, we've done a lot of IT backups, had support from them. We've done some security software, different monthly packages, installations. They're all things that have been through to committee. That's what that money is for, but it is elsewhere in the budget. If you see, I haven't done a contra on the budget to where it's
So
spent.
you've got your 48,000, which is more than the budget, but you've got this money to support it. Okay.
In summary, on that line on IT software, basically it now costs us double, well, not quite double, but a bit 10k more than it has in past years.
But again, if you look at the computing costs, they've come down because I've been much more clearer in terms of what comes under computing costs and what's in support and software. So if you look, I've played with those figures so that they are more in line with what they should be. Next one, HR. The next one, HR. Did you want to look at that one?
Before you go into all of them.
Yeah.
So our role for the other committees are to do what?
So I'm conscious, so this committee does have staffing lines now, which are separate to this spreadsheet. So if we look at the top level of staffing, we're able to do that in open session. If we start talking about anything specific, then we have to go into exempt. But this is about individuals and different service areas. So there are some changes to that, and that comes under this committee now.
What I meant was, are we taking decisions on it, or are we just receiving this information?
For this one, GNR, you're making decisions in terms of you're recommending that as what we're going forwards with. Overall, you're receiving them, you're saying, well, is that the right level that we think the council feels or would accept, bearing in mind you're covering every committee, so you know each committee in your own right, the direction of travel, and then you're recommending to full council whether that is the right approach or not. So you are recommending to full council. You can't make the decision here, only full council can set the precept and council tax.
But it looks reasonable.
And then Councillor Larson.
Can I make a suggestion? I don't know if this is helpful. I'm conscious that we won't have the intimate detail or knowledge behind HR subcommittee necessarily in FCNT, P&L. Maybe we should start at the end. What's the over and under for this year and next year and then the year after, and then work back from there. If we're not happy with that number, then it might be that we look at those budgets to say, well, actually, we need E&F to find £100,000 or whatever it might be, just as a suggestion.
That's what I was just going to say, because the way we're doing it, we're going through each budget and approving it, and then at the very end, if we're not happy with the overall result, we've approved everything. I was happy to approve the GNR budget because that's this committee. But if we go through all the rest of them, we're going to say, yeah, it's a fantastic budget, let's recommend it. And then we go, hang on a minute, we don't like the figures at the end and we've approved everything.
A related question, which was the same, that I wanted the context, but specifically looking at that overall budget for the full council, am I correct in understanding that recommendation for precept increase is 1.29% there in yellow? No. What does that 1.29 mean?
So the increase on the precept for Cornwall Council is calculated on a Band D property. The precept suggested within the information that you have in the documents is a 0%. There is no increase this financial year. The precept on a Band D property was £300.98 last year, and it is the same this year. So this is a no % increase budget on a Band D property. If you look at the two figures that on the second section down that's in yellow, it says 398. If you look to the blue and the grey before, you can see that they're the same. So there's been no increase in the budget this year.
Helpful. What does the 1.29 mean? What is that?
So the 1.29 is where I play with figures. Sorry, no. It's where I look at putting in budget figures to adjust the general fund, etc., to make sure that those balances are correct. So that's what I use to tweak them slightly. Yeah, sorry, they're for me more than you, and maybe I should have unhighlighted them. Apologies. Just to complicate things.
I know that we're saying that we would have a standstill budget. I mean, me personally, I've said, you know, every year I feel that it should go up because every other bill goes up. We had a massive increase last year. I know I might be shouted down or my proposal won't be seconded, but I personally believe that we should put something on like 2%, because what will happen is next year, when there is a new council, they'll be left because the next year we'd have to put out probably 11%. But that is just my sort of saying, I think this is what we should do, but it's open to the floor.
So, I mean, I've spent a lot of time looking through these numbers over the last few months. I think I absolutely understand where you're coming from, Councillor North. I think the reason why I think that that's particularly unpalatable this year, and also unnecessary, is because we know that we're going to get a what we've titled a dividend in a second home council tax, which means that I think we said there's about 600 homes in Newquay, second highest in the county after St Ives, who will be paying double council tax this year. That equates to somewhere in the region of, are we allowed to say the number? 150 to 200,000 pounds, probably closer to 200,000, I'm led to believe. And actually, I think it'd be a really difficult message to say we're going to get an extra £200,000 and we're going to charge you some more. We are going to utilise the majority of that dividend to top up EMRs where they have been quite heavily used over the last few years. And I think when we look at next year's, the proposed number looks something like 6 or 7% increase, but that takes into consideration an assumption that we lose 80% of the second home double tax, which I think is probably the right way to go, but is overly cautious. People will find loopholes, but I mean, I can't see 80% of them doing so, although, I'm sure I'll be shocked to be proven wrong. But actually, if it isn't 80% next year, it's 50%, then there's another 2 or 3% reduction in that number, which brings it down to more like inflation next year. So actually, what we've done is we've stabilised the budget of this council over the last year. With the dividend, we've now got the opportunity to save the taxpayer a little bit of money this year. Next year looks pretty healthy around inflation if an increase is required, depending on some other work that could be done through some of the pieces of work that we're doing around structure and reviewing some of that. I also happen to think that there is probably 1% or 2% in terms of our outgoings that needs to be looked at over the next 12 months that where we could find. So actually, I mean, I'm rambling, but essentially what I'm saying is I think we take this win, which is essentially what it is. We've worked really hard for it. You know, we've had to go through some difficult times to get here, but you know, it's only right that we give the taxpayers a break this year and not increase the council tax, and look to next year at what I would hope would be a maximum of around inflation. And the year after doesn't look too bad either, to be honest. So when you consider 2 or 3 years ago, we were talking about double digits every year for 5 years, I think what we've managed to achieve is pretty good, I'd say.
Thank you, Chair. There's a couple of points, and I don't mind if they're answered separately. And I'm pleased that you brought in the reasoning, because as you can see, I sat in through that presentation I couldn't make today. I had to do it in lots of little bits because I had to fit it in. Just a comment, I don't know why on my presentation I had a picture of Alan Googe, Councillor Googe, all the time I sat through the presentation, so I'd check that, because if anybody else has had to sit through that, I feel sorry for them. He must have been online, he was there all the way through the presentation. I also probably took a faster speed, which I never knew you could do, which meant I got through it quicker, but you all sounded a little bit Mickey Mousey. What I got from that is obviously across the budget there's quite an increase, in spend. There's an increase across staffing because we know we've got lots of things, pressures with national insurance contributions and the pay review. So I'm pleased that Councillor Creek has explained why, although there's quite a substantial increase across the budget, we're not necessarily having to put the precept up because we've had this windfall. And I think that was important, because anybody watching this who knows figures would be looking at this budget and thinking, hang on a minute, you're spending a load more than you spent last year, or you're going to spend a load more than you spent last year. Why are we not paying for it? Now we know it's a windfall. And I think you're quite right to take that 80% reduction, because there'll be loopholes and people will find a way around it, sadly, and not pay it. So we can't rely on it. And I'm glad it's going into EMR and not part of the actual budget. My only concerns that I got from watching that presentation, and you can answer these separately, the first concern was, and it was towards the summary at the end, and Councillor Kenny had already left by then for her own reasons, so you might not be aware of this, but there was a definite reference to the office being targeted to get this nil precept rise. The actual words were that that's the target we were set, and it will be down to you members. If you don't agree with it, then you will have the right to change it. And I know the clerk and the financial officer also made indication that they weren't happy with a nil precept rise. And they said that in that meeting, but it wasn't taken on board. And I also know some members said that there should have been an inflationary precept rise. Now, I'm not for an inflationary precept rise, because that comes to my second point. But the first thing I'd like to know is, where did the target come from? There was mentions of political word was used a few times. I personally, as a councillor, at any committee meeting that I've been to, have never witnessed any pressure being put on the office to put a budget together that had no precept rise, and that concerns me, because the office is the office, the budget is the budget. So I just wanted to know why there seemed to be a target to effect a no precept rise. So that's my first point I'd like answering.
To ask a question on that, because the line in here, precept seems to have a rising number from 26 to 28. So we do have a precept rise built
Yeah,
in.
so the precept has risen because the number of people, houses has risen.
Okay.
Not the Band D figure. That's
I
how it's
see.
calculated.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, so the bandies stayed constant. So we have had a couple of members feedback and wishing to try and achieve a zero rise. I think that's what we were referring to. So there has been no official target set, because obviously this is the committee that would set it. But I think a number of members over the year have requested us to work as hard as we can to get a zero rise. So that's what we're referencing, really.
Okay, I'll take
Can
that.
I carry on that one? Be politically cynical. We're facing an election next year. It's be very unlikely that anybody's going to be supporting a rise of rising. My personal thing is that I think I still disapprove of the rise we had last year, and I think after this year we will have a view of just what we have spent. And I personally think that, as you said later, towards the end of your spiel, Councillor Creek, was we really need to go through and see what economies we can make. There is a cost of living crisis out there, and we need to reflect that. So I just don't, after, 28% rise on the precept last year, I just don't think we can justify any rise at all, but I'd like it to come down. But let's see, as of next year, we will have a better idea of what's been spent where. Whereas at the moment, we're still anticipating year to date, and our year to date figures have never been that hot. I mean, they're better now you're here, Anne, but they've never been
More
that
accurate
much.
now.
So it's only my second point, and I'm sorry for the confusion. I meant a Band D rise, not a precept rise. Sorry, I do understand the difference between precept and Band D. No, I'm glad you clarified it because I've got the wrong figure. The other thing is I didn't support the big rise last year, as is on record. But again, my second point is a budget. I'm a business person, so we have not anything near as formal as this, because in the private sector you don't have to be quite so formal, especially when you're the only business owner. But we have a budget setting process for our business every year. I've been through on this council now probably 14, 15 budget setting processes, and every year it's always a surprise as to the figure we come up with, and then we debate it at great length because it can be adjusted and we make adjustments, and we end up with a percentage increase normally. I can't remember a decrease, but we may have had one. What worries me again about this budget is the fact that we've been able to put together a budget across all those committees, including this committee, that results in an exact zero increase in a Band D. Now, being cynical, as Joanna Kenny's just pointed out, we can be sometimes. I've never ever witnessed a true budget setting process where you've come to such an exact figure that there is no Band D increase whatsoever. And then if I relate back to my first point, which was, I was under the impression that I felt that there was a target to get that nil increase figure. You put that together, nil increase figure as a target, and lo and behold, a budget that has a nil increase figure, and that makes me really concerned. And they're my 2 points.
The only comment I would make is obviously we've spent a lot of time looking at the earmark reserves, and that's where we've but we've made the figures balance, and it's the general fund 3 months that we're trying to achieve. So you will notice there's a number of coloured cells in earmark reserves, and that's where we've changed things from previous budgets where we may have planned to release money each year, or we've scaled back. So we have made it balance. But that's making it balance, as opposed to, if I'm talking as an officer now, I would certainly advocate increases in terms of factoring in inflation. We have no idea right now what the impact of the national insurance increase is going to be across every single service contract we have, which is predominantly all our expenditure. We could find there's going to be a 5 or 6% or more rise across every single contract. That's not in here.
And I want to clarify, this is not an accusation, this is a concern. I agree with your concerns. I listened to that meeting, and at the end, but I'm finding it very difficult, as is Councillor Kenny, to support a just let's do an inflationary increase. My concerns don't rest around how it's all been put together, the fact that it balances exactly, and that's just never happens, and that gives me concern going forward that it's going to cause us big problems. But now I'm in this unfortunate position where the only way to rectify that is either go back to the budget and say we need to spend more on things, or agree to a 2% inflation increase when there's no proof or justification. And that's what leaves me uncomfortable, really.
Fine that what they've done is they've got to this figure because of what they're putting into the reserves.
Yeah,
and it's a balancing figure. That happens all the time. I certainly wouldn't support a 2% increase. In terms of the process, we've had rows about this before. Are councillors permitted to come in with an amendment at the budget meeting?
The strong advice we've had in the past is once you have a formal recommendation from this committee that's looked at everything, looked at the risk assessments, and you have your full detail, the report that goes to full council, you should not be changing that on the night. You would have to throw it out and look at it again, because you don't know what the implications are on the night. We can obviously have spreadsheets available, but changing one line on one spreadsheet may have ramifications we haven't worked through, which is why it's done in such a structured way with all the committees. So if council says, right, we want to go down to a 1% reduction, for example, as an amendment, there's no risk assessment that exists that looks at that. There's no numbers that exist right now that looks at that. So we would be really rushing on the night. That's where you have problems later down the line. So they strongly advise not to.
It's preferable not to. I mean, I've made amendments in my time. I do think you can say in the process that if you are going to make an amendment, you must have it done by at least, so that you have a chance to see the implications. So at least 10 days before. So I think it's not very democratic to say, well, we've got 6 people in this room and we've decided what the budget is going to be, and it doesn't really matter for the rest of you. So I think we have to be open to someone coming in I mean, I hope they don't. Because my other point about the process is I see absolutely no reason for me, who knows nothing about these committees, to go through at this point and say, well, your construction is wrong, because I don't have the knowledge. If I wasn't happy with the end result, then yes, I would. But I don't see, it's a really bit of a waste of our time going through the individual budgets. We do have to respect the committees. The end result appears to be a good one. If I was worried about the end result, then I would go through with a fine-tooth comb, but I just don't think it's a waste of our time tonight trying to do it, because we'd literally be rubber stamping it.
Thank you, Chair. So just to come back on your concern around NI, obviously this isn't something that we have a number for today, but what I would say to give the committee some confidence is that at the moment the staff fund EMR is £327,430. We, in this budget, are topping it up to £517,342. And even with releases that are planned next year, the amount of money that is projected to be closing at the end of 2025 is £452,000. I think you've got there's £2 million worth of EMRs there by the look of it. I completely accept, Andy, that the NI, is an unknown at this particular moment in time, though not enough of a concern, I don't think, to take a knee-jerk reaction and automatically increase everyone's precept. And I stand by the budget, to be honest. I have to take a little bit of umbrage with Councillor Hannon's comments. They do sound somewhat directed. I think what my experience over the last 3.5 years on this council is that every year, let me be really clear, every year that another political party had a majority on this council, there was a target to be achieved in terms of a precept number. So to all of a sudden suggest that something underhand has happened, I think is out of order. There have been a number of informal budget setting meetings which a number of us have attended, and I'll be the first to say that having spent a lot of time on these budgets over the last couple of years and having needed to stabilise the budget last year with a really tricky decision, whether you agree with that or not, there was no alternative put on the table. What we've got today is a sensible budget that has increases in spend allowed for, A, by the increase in the number of homes in Newquay, and B, the dividend that we're going to get from the second home tax. That is sensibly factored in going forward. And from what I can see over the projected 3-year period, this looks like a good, fair deal for residents. And actually, that doesn't take into account the optimisations and efficiencies that I know that this council can make in the next year. You know, we're spending £500,000 projected next year on toilets. £500,000. That's 1/6 of our entire budget, providing, let's be really honest about this, the majority of that is used for tourists to go to the toilet. And as a taxpayer in Newquay, I've maybe used one of our public toilets once in the last 12 months, but it's cost me about, or the tax cost the taxpayer about £4 to £5 every time someone's used a toilet in Newquay, even after they paid their 50p. So, you know, there's an area that I think we can save some money on, and there are a number of others. I think there's some stuff we can do on procurement. I think there's lots what we can do. We're obviously talking about staff structures, optimising services. There's loads we can do, buckets loads. But this right now, looking at this, seems fair to me.
So can I just come in, and Councillor Kenny said about us, you know, saying about these budgets. What we have to remember is everybody was invited, whichever committee they sit on, to input the budget. So everybody has had their say on the committee in which they sit. They had the informal meetings that both Anne and Andy, you know, gave to everybody. So everybody's had that opportunity. So they shouldn't be coming in at the last minute at full council. We're not rushing anything here. We did believe that if we get through this evening, that, you know, if Anne could, we don't know whether she'll be able to, got the report ready, that we could take it to full council on the 4th December rather than have to meet again on the 18th, because there have been, I'm not saying we're doing it, Councillor Kenny, because we've already had apologies for the 18th of December. We've had lots of apologies for meetings in January, and we clearly do not want Cornwall Council to tell us how to spend our money. We've been really prudent, we've done really well here in Newquay over a number of years, and we don't want Cornwall Council telling us, you know, what we should be doing with our money. So that's why we're here at GNR. We will be recommending the budget to the full council. That's our role.
That will be, I hadn't realised, on the 4th.
No, you didn't listen to me.
Yeah,
What I said was that if Anne was in a position, if we recommend all of this evening, she may or she may not be able to get all that done by Wednesday. And if she did, it would go out for our meeting for the 4th December, and we would look at it going through on the 4th December, as opposed to having another meeting on the 18th where we've already had some apologies. So that's what we're looking that we may or may not do.
And tonight was, I wouldn't want to spend too much time going through individual budgets for committees of which I am not involved.
Yeah.
When I'm reasonably happy with the overall recommendation. I think it's different if you're not happy with the overall recommendation, but there's no point in me, I mean, we have always spent high on toilets, and then we need to compare before and after, but I don't think we're in a position to do that at this meeting, and I don't think it's necessary to do it at this meeting.
No. Are we now going to go through 7C, each budget? We don't have to go line by line. You either are happy for me to propose and somebody to second and take forward to full council.
Is it the whole thing as well?
So you can either say if there's relative consensus that the overall numbers are fine, those are the recommendations that you need to make, and they are written down under 7C. So you've got the gross expenditure budget, precept, the fact that the general fund would be at 3 months, the total EMR balance, and then the impact of being a nil rise. That's your recommendation. It's only, I believe, if members have got concerns and wish to go through particular committees that you would need to do that, bearing in mind the committees have already looked at their budgets quite in detail with Anne.
Are you all happy to do them en masse? Okay? Yep. So I'm happy to present 7C, everything that's itemised, so I'm happy to propose that. Seconded by Councillor Creek. All in favour? Lovely. So we'll take that forward to either the full council meeting on the 4th December or the 18th as planned. Sorry.
Can I just ask a quick question? Is there genuine any concerns if it was the 4th, if we're able to do the 4th? I'm conscious that's earlier than we were planning, and it means we don't have a separate meeting.
If she can do it, but that is a big ask.
I appreciate that, so that's why I've just put it out there. I said we're hoping that maybe, if not, we'll meet on the 18th, hoping that we're quorate because, you know, we have already had apologies, unfortunately.
I'm away 4th.
Pardon? You're away on the 4th?
Yeah, unfortunately I'm away that.
We haven't had apologies for the 4th yet, but we have for the 18th. Pardon?
I'm back for the 18th.
Yeah.
I mean, I was hoping for a short meeting. That was my birthday, the 4th, so I was hoping to have a nice short full council meeting, but, you know.
Only have an invitation for a meeting on the 18th of November, not December.
We have a budget meeting, 18th December.
Yeah,
Some time ago.
I don't see it anywhere in my email or anything, sorry.
Original date that was set by full council.
Yeah,
Um,
I've got it in mind.
so-
I call it. The proviso that Anne may get it ready for the 4th. If she doesn't, it'll be the 18th, but I'm just giving you the heads up.
So item 8, Chair, if it helps, is an annual process, and it's to confirm and recommend to full council that we're happy that the internal audit and controls are independent, that the internal auditor, Steve Hudson, is effective for what we need in terms of checking, and it's just a recommendation to full council as part of the annual governance and assurance.
Sorry, just a question on that one. How many years have we had this auditor and how many are we supposed to? Sorry.
There's no maximum or minimum.
Okay.
I believe 4 years, no? 3, 4 years.
We signed a 3-year contract with him last year, so this is the second year of a 3-year. And he was here the first year I was here. How long he was here before that, I'm not sure.
Could we get that checked and reported back to us, please? I think it is good practice that we at least know and then check against any guidance for local councils.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we know the guidance because we've had this issue. So in Cornwall, there's very few internal auditors at this level that can handle our size of council. I believe Steve Hudson covers some other larger councils in Cornwall purely because there aren't any others. But we will check and report back at the next meeting how long he has actually been with us.
Thank you. I just think for the record it's healthier. I mean, we are a governance committee, so thank you.
Yeah, sorry, it was just a quick question on the cricket club. Was it Newquay Cricket Club we gave the £4,000 for the container to recently? Yeah, that's not in the report, is it? It says that. But it was a grant application.
Served it from some years before, had we?
Right, there were issues with it, wasn't it? It went to the wrong committee and then it went to the right committee, then it came to this committee, and in the end, we granted it. But that was only a few months ago.
What we're raising is that I think our policy says you're only supposed to get one in a year or 2 years or something like that. So whilst in principle we'd love to, are we about, would we be in breach of our policy?
I believe the policy says it's normal practice. We wouldn't look to do an annual or regular grant, but we have for other organisations, and it's a long-standing. We would look at other applications probably at a higher level as opposed to those ones.
And I'm sorry, because I don't have that IBEBS access today, is it, did I hear someone say it's a refugees cricket?
So Newquay Cricket Club has, it says over 15, and then further down it says 15 to 16 Afghan refugees who are now part of their cricket club, and they want to give them their whites, their bats and all the equipment, and that's why. But it is interesting, I'd missed that off, that they've put on, have you received any funding before 2023? They've put, can't remember, but will be on your, I'm just reading the website because it doesn't go up, £1,000. Councillor Hannan.
I mean, that concerns me. I mean, we gave them a grant for £4,000 and they can't remember it, and they can only remember 1,000 from 23.
Well, that's even a query, to be honest.
Well, yeah, but to not remember that we gave them 4,000 is a little bit sad, I'm afraid. But I don't know, I support the cricket club. It's just that there's only so much money in the pot and they've had a couple of goes at it.
Good project, though. I mean, it's sort of, I just wonder how good the cricket players they are. But so it's really good to have them integrating into our society. £900 isn't a huge amount of money. I just think they could have been a little more formal about just how much money have we given you and for what.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree. It seems like a great project. I think it would have been useful to have in the, the officers' memo or notice, details of the grant that we've already given them. Presumably, we've checked to make sure they did purchase the container that they were purchasing for the club to use as changing facilities. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy to support this. I think, we've got a number of refugees within our community. I think the more that we we sort of bring them into clubs like this and engage them in the community, the less of this horrible hatred that there will be. So yeah, so all for supporting this one. I'm happy to propose it.
To next time, make sure you.
Perhaps we go back to them and say, could they just fill that form in properly, because they have had grants, they had the 4,000, so that the paperwork is exact when it goes through our process.
I think we actually talked about having a plaque on this said container that said funded by Newquay Town Council. I don't know if that was ever followed up on. It was part of the the optics of we give lots of grants, but we don't do a lot of
before next summer
comms on it.
Yeah.
Get the refugees to put the kit on and take a photo, so we've got photos. We'll keep them. If they didn't do the plaque, we'll certainly want the photo, but we'd like both. keep Sarah Thompson obviously in the loop because she's sort of doing it with him. I don't know if Anne wants to say anything about that. No.
I don't think there's any need. He's emailed all members and there'll be a detailed update in the new year.
Drafted applications for external, that's the same one. Correspondence, we have had an email from Newquay Twinning Society. They're a little bit vague in what they're asking for. I appreciate that the Mayor of Dinard, they want to have him or she next year in the spring, and at their recent AGM they were looking for some funding, but the clerk is going to go back and ask what exactly they do want, and they need to fill a grant application for it, I believe.
I think I actually responded to them.
Councillor Hannon and Councillor Kenny.
Yeah, I've only just read this because I didn't have time to read it before I came in. I see I'm no longer a councillor and they've spelt my surname wrong, but that's not too bad. I did actually join the social twinning for a couple of years, just to get a feel for what they did, because I know how different it is to the council official twinning. I was probably the last official councillor attached to the Dinard. I did hear it in that meeting that it was brought up by, I think, Councillor Thompson, about why are we keeping the 2,500 in the budget. I tried several times to get the official reinstated. You came on one of the last ones when I was mayor, first time round, and that's when we introduced the police and the fire brigade to try to get a bit more mileage out of it, because it was viewed as a bit of a jolly for councillors, if I'm honest. So we tried to up it a bit, and we did get the police coming over here and the fire brigade for a year or two when we had the inspector here. I gave up purely because they had election after election and their committee structure changed and it wasn't supported. And I went to the last time they had a unofficial twinning. I was invited as a guest and I had to say a little speech to welcome them, because I think at the time Councillor Craze was mayor and she sidestepped it really elegantly and put me in the frame. I'd love to support them. I think it is a true twinning. It's not the official twinning, but unless we can get the official twinning going again, you're right, why keep it in the budget if there's no appetite? But that'll be a good chance for the mayor to speak to the mayor, M. Arnaud Salmon. Don't know how long he's been there, Arnaud, I can't pronounce it. But that'll be a good time to engage, because that's the person who'll know whether there is any mileage at all in an official twinning being resurrected, because that's who you'd be dealing with. So I would find out what you can and then see what you can do, because it'd be a shame to let it go.
So just to let you know, I was invited last year to Janet Rowlands. She had, and presumably informal, I don't know, at her own house, and the mayor was there. It was a female, I can't remember her name, and Susan from TIC came with me because we'd won this award to show them, but it was really just an informal cup of tea and a biscuit type thing. But there was a lot of people there who I knew from around Newquay, but I don't think it was a formal one, and Janet kept chasing me about that. But we are just the clerk, so I'll propose that the clerk writes back and asks what is it that they're really looking for. Councillor Kane.
To add on to the point, I have never understood why we've had two twinning associations of Dinard. I mean, it's not, I went on one of the trips to Dinard many, many years ago, and yes, it was a wonderful jolly. They were incredibly generous. And I think we've looked after them quite well, but I just never understood why there were two. So I would have thought the formal side, getting the police and the fire brigade, we could introduce that into their private twinning. I mean, it's really just about finding the accommodation, isn't it? Which they're quite good at.
I mean, the major differences from being involved in both is that the social twinning, they go across there and they literally just partner up with families. So it is more of a holiday, it's a social. The official one, we did reciprocate when we went out there. They came back to the Great Western. The problem we always had was that their budget seemed to be in the tens of thousands and our budget was in the thousands. But it never caused any major problems, and that 2,500 was put in the budget because we'd managed successfully previously to get within that. So I've always thought at 2,500 it wasn't a massive commitment to keep it going officially. The official one needed to be more of a swapping of ideas around TIC, around fire, around they've got CCTV in Dinard because we had it. They didn't know anything about CCTV. You know, they didn't know how to put it together, and we showed them how we were doing it here, and they've now got it. They've now got Shop Watch. They had Pub Watch. They learnt more off us, I must say, than we probably brought back from them. But that's the official twinning, to share ideas around we're a tourist town, you're a tourist town. How can we share ideas to make our tourist towns better? The social one is a family staying with a family and making friends and connections. And so they are different, but they could be probably brought a bit more together.
Send a letter, seconder.
It's from Youth Art Connect. She's been in contact with me about this particular item as well.
I had an email that say that they were winding up Youth Art. We're winding up, but now they've come in with this application. I'm unsure why they didn't get involved with Experience Newquay with all the artwork that we're doing at the moment. So I feel that I'm going to recommend that we leave this till next year when the new council comes in, rather than commit to something, because if they were considering winding up, you know, a month ago, and now they're reopening, we don't want to commit money that, you know, we're not sure where it, no, I'm not saying we wouldn't know where it goes, but
Where did you think they were winding up?
Yeah, so on the 7th of October, we did have an email from Youth Art Connect saying that after much consideration, we have made the difficult decision to close down Youth Art Connect CIC. This has been a hard choice, but due to a combination of circumstances and challenges in securing sustainable funding, we feel that this is the best course of action at this time. It's quite a lengthy email, which I'm happy to circulate to members. I think certainly the practice around, you know, you've gone through your grants processes now. That was changed this year, so you had gateways. This is outside of the gateways, so you're talking about next year's budget really, unless you want to do something different for this particular request. That really is to the new council. So the new council is not bound by anything this council does. If you decide something today, the new council can unpick that on their first meeting in May. So it is better that you have budgets set with the new council, and they're the ones that determine it.
I mean, I just note this email, you're saying she sent that email on the 7th of October, then this email came on the 6th of November. So I guess they've reversed their, and you know, there's obviously a bit of thought gone into it. The request to us is only 2,000. I did respond to her saying, did she know about our grants? And actually I asked our grants officer if he would be aware of any grants that they might apply to separately, because I said to her, look, we have a grants process. You know, I'm sorry, but you just missed the window, sort of thing. It's a bit unfortunate. Because in principle we'd love to support this, but you know that's our job, is to work with the budget. So Kieran did come through with a funding opportunity, which I've sent the link on to her. And then she said that the police have provisionally said they'd love to maybe support applying for boardmasters funding. And so, you know, that it may go ahead, but as I say, I've just said to her that look, we have a grants process. So if in terms of timing to the suggestion on the table, if we're going to respond to any, you know, a more formal response to, if someone could alert her of what the dates would be to apply, given that my reading of it was that it was a sort of an urgent project, and given it was only £2,000, sort of fair enough in a sense. But if it does get delayed, then she might be able to apply through the normal grants process. And I guess if we need to do due diligence on checking but my presumption is they've decided not to shut down because, and great, if not. So that's my understanding. And yeah, I just think the timing's a bit of a shame. But if we can just help, anyone internally could drop her an email with the actual dates for the application, because off the top of my head I wasn't.
I think that's the challenge, because the new council could say no grants.
Oh, I see what you mean.
So we can certainly say the new council
Window
was
next
established
year.
in
If there is a window,
yeah.
it might be these dates. Got you. Sorry, my apologies.
Is this a youth-oriented project? Yes. So we do have the youth fund that you said we hadn't spent? So, but I would be very dubious until, you get, we're closing and, oh, by the way, give us some money. I would be very, very, very dubious. We've been stung that way before.
I've attended their events before, volunteers,
They did
and
say they were closing, so effectively, I just don't know what they're doing.
I was just going to say the majority of our grants, unless they specifically ask, are only payment after completion and proof that they've paid bills. So when they're not asking, or you could agree not to give them the money up front, but it is something you could do after, if they proved all that expenditure has gone, that then you would support it because you would already know that the project's been a success.
There's £5,000 in the youth fund, isn't there? Yeah. I mean, I have to say, I've been in contact with Marie about this, and Mark from BID, who's also super keen for a number of reasons. And, there is some, there's obviously quite a lot of public support for murals and artistry at the moment. I have to say, I might be inclined to, to propose that we release up to £2,000 from the youth grant pot on completion of the project.
But not until we are certain that this is an organisation that still exists.
Yes.
I suppose I'd come in, she needs to put it through a proper grant application.
I don't think it's limited to our two a year, is it? Because it's two different pots. It's a different pot, so it can come in as a one-off aimed at our youth project. Just needs to be
We can presumably spend the 5,000 youth pot on whatever we want, as long as it's got something to do with the youth. That was the purpose of it, right? Yeah. So yes. Anne, sorry.
I think my only comment would be that that pot of money has not been advertised in any way. So there might be a number of youth groups that would have maybe liked access to it that haven't. So there's only that side of it.
Is that correct?
Less than.
Less than half of that.
What I would argue is that is the council's decision. It's not a grant pot. It's a pot of money that the council established to spend on the youth of Newquay in one form or another. This may well fit the bill. Maybe we should suggest some delegated authority to the chair, the vice chair, maybe Councillor Kenny if she's willing, and an officer to maybe Anne to do some due diligence around this, but essentially give those people delegated authority to release that up to 2,000 should the due diligence come back that it's appropriate and subject to the usual bits and pieces.
It's easier to get somebody else to do it than to do it ourselves.
And I think it needs to be subject to whether she gets that other 3,000.
Yeah.
So is that your proposal?
I'll propose.
Sorry, I just had a question, which was, I do support the doing due diligence, and we do quite rightly do that on any of these sort of community grants, donations, support. I don't know I don't know a lot about. I think it was like 2 years ago that I attended one of their events. It was really well done. I was there for 3 or 4 hours with youth who it seemed it was quite useful for and impactful for. my understanding is that this is a small community organisation. I don't know that they would have the money up front, and I don't know how on earth they would get that. So whilst the due diligence absolutely makes sense, and even saying we would release it in stages as you did one mural and then the next, I almost think it's pointless for us to put them through that if where are they going to find 2,000 up front, sort of thing. They operate on a shoestring, but my experience is that they're diligent at how they do that, and that may be why they were realistic about saying we think we need to close, because they're trying to be diligent and not get into debt and things like that. And I don't think they would even be able to. Sorry.
So through the chair, I think if that's the case, then I would certainly expect as a minimum standard the grant application process is followed in terms of they fill in the form, we understand all the detail, we make sure they've got all the things that we require, and then that's your minimum.
Yeah. No, I think your point on an application form makes sense, and could we say that that delegated group requests that goes through? So is everyone comfortable with that amendment? And if that went through, then a consideration of whether maybe staging it so that they could actually do the project. Right. Thank you.
To ask is what is bid giving? She's talking about Mark, but she hasn't mentioned about what Mark.
Right. Yeah, as part of the diligence, asking who else is supporting. Right. Thank you. I was suggesting just that. Thank you. Okay, I don't hear any objections.
So the recommendation 12A, B, C. They're all the, pardon? These are all the earmark releases, so we'll do them one by one?
Yep, I think it's better one by one. I think just for context, so this is where I mentioned these were all recommended as EMR releases. Obviously, if ENF has suggested any underspend could be looked at, then that's absolutely fine. I'm sure we can give an indication of what's left. £600. So you could probably do, was it the last one? There was one that's quite small.
200 quid.
Yeah, so that one you can do, but the others, EMR releases, which go to full council's recommendation.
Yeah.
So there were three, weren't there? Sorry, Councillor Hanlon.
I think we were aware, weren't we, that they were going to have to go to full council. So I think if you just go through what each one is, because I don't think we awarded all of them fully, did we? I think 2 we did and 1 we amended. And made a compromise, which might be the one we can approve now, ironically.
The £200 to the blood kits, and we said we would offer 20%, I think. Mine won't come up on iBabs, unfortunately.
Yeah, they wanted £1,000 for some blood bleed kits, that's the word, that they were going to give to bars around Newquay for if anyone got stabbed. They had a kit there to instantly put on the wound, and it would help to, ultimately help the individual that had been stabbed until someone professionally could get there. I think our concern, and this is the second time that this particular grant has come to ENF, no, that's okay. And what we said was, if we just give these kits to the bars, chances are they'll just go under the bar somewhere and no one will really care. Whereas if they have to purchase them or put some money towards them, there's some incentive for them to actually train their staff how to use them, tell them where it is. And, so what we said is we'd give them a 20% subsidy after they'd sold the units, which 10 kits, yeah. 200 quid total. So 20 quid off a kit each. Yeah, I think the last time that we talked about this at this committee, there was conversation around some of the weed control, vegetation management pioneers, someone called them the other day, which I thought was quite a nice way of describing them. On the road, we obviously stopped spraying the roads of Newquay with glyphosate this year, or didn't renew the contract. This particular policy talks about not using herbicides, pesticides and fungicides. We have, in fact, just for context, so for context, we have ceased offering that service to Cornwall Council. They obviously asked us to do it a number of years ago. They gave us some money to do it, pretty much when they decided they were going to go glyphosate free and pass it on to the town council. So it looks good for Cornwall Council. We don't use glyphosates, but all they've done is they've passed that on to the town and parish councils. We decided as a committee this year that we weren't going to continue. In fact, we informed Cornwall Council back in March, I think, and we wrote to them again just very recently, confirming from the 1st of January that is their responsibility, should they wish to take it up again. The issue around this particular policy, I seem to remember, was Councillor Kenny and I were having a debate around the management of the vegetation at the side of the road, and that's just for clarification, that's where the road meets the bottom corner of the curb, not the top of the curb, not the verge, and certainly not the paths, which is historically where we've sprayed glyphosate on that corner. For context, our Environment Service Manager informed us at the last ENF meeting, because we'd suggested hiring some road sweepers to go around and clear that particular portion of the road network around Newquay to remove any undergrowth or opportunity for these pioneers to grow. Quite like that term. And essentially Cornwall Council's response to our Environment Services Manager, he told us, was, don't bother, we already do it once a month anyway. So we offered to pay them to do it. They said, no, we're doing it already. That said, I've not seen any evidence of them actually doing that, certainly not on the around where I'm living at the moment. So so that's where we're at. I mean, I'm happy to propose that this biodiversity policy is taken forward. Presumably it has to go to full council for full ratification, but I don't think we should be throwing the baby out with the bathwater here. It's a great policy. Councillor Larson has spent a lot of time on it, and what it does do, is improve biodiversity in our town, and even this year, without spraying glyphosate around the road networks, I think there was a report actually that came out from Cornwall Council a couple of months ago saying that biodiversity had increased in Newquay by a significant amount. I can't remember the figure.
Right, so what the policy is now saying is that within our estate we will avoid using pesticides and whatever they are. The debate we had was, if you were going to do this and apply this to your spraying of the weeds on the roadside, then we would have to have an alternative. The alternative seems to be, well, just stop doing it. And I just don't consider that an adequate, because what's happened is we've had a huge amount of complaints coming. We've all seen the undergrowth in the roads. I mean, it's all very well you saying, well, we won't do it in order to get this policy through. But what's happening to our streets? I mean, what has Cornwall Council said? Thank you very much, we will now do this work. Because if they are doing something to it once every month, I can't see any signs of it. And meanwhile, the undergrowth is going, and we are looking shoddy. Am I not on? I'm on here, I think. I'm on here. So, frankly, I just think there's nothing wrong with the policy within our estate, but I think the solution of saying, well, we'll solve the alternative for the problem on the streets by just not doing it, is not an acceptable. I've got a real problem with that. So have Cornwall Council come back.
Yeah. So my understanding is, and I know that Andy can help us here, I don't know if Joe has kept you up to date with this one, but Cornwall Council responded acknowledging the fact that we would not continue spraying their road network with glyphosate, and have accepted that from the 1st of January it's their responsibility.
Spray, or you didn't say, that's not what you said.
So the contract that we have with Cornwall Council is not to manage the road, it is to spray the road to prevent weeds.
Yes.
We have said we are not spraying the roads with glyphosate to prevent weeds, which is the contract. Yeah. Our contract is not to go around and manually remove weeds from the road.
Yeah.
The contract is to spray the road. We've said we're not spraying the road, and Cornwall Council will acknowledge that.
So as a result, we've got weeds.
On Cornwall Council's roads, yes.
Out that, firstly, this is the first I've heard of, what was the word, a huge amount of complaints. Well, it would be great if you might forward some of them on, because we've also had people saying they're glad to hear that glyphosate wasn't being used, and other dangerous methods. And then secondly, a lot of what is being seen, and we have seen one or two, and not a huge amount, but we've seen one or two complaints, and clearly, and we had a gentleman who attended, and there was a discussion with him that most of what he was complaining about was the verges, which have never been managed by Newquay, and there's a lot of confusion in the town about how the verges are overgrown in many places, and in some places actually Cornwall Council said they would come and mow them, and then usually they do, and there's been some places they hadn't when they said they would, but most of the concern was actually about the verges. Rather, as Councillor Crick has sort of been trying to explain, there's a big difference between where the road meets the curb and the verges that are overgrown in many places.
I assure you there have been a lot of complaints about the standard of the roads and where we used to spray. Now it looks messy, and that's what people are telling us. So there have been a lot of complaints on that. I've received a lot of complaints on that. I have nothing wrong with the policy because it's now very limited. My concern is that you've just suddenly stopped providing a service without actually saying to Cornwall Council, and I mean Cornwall Council is so strapped for cash, they're not going to do it. And that is, I mean, you just said, right, guys, we're just not going to do it. It's your responsibility. There's no negotiation, no discussion about what could be done, whether we could work together. I mean, that is, frankly, an appalling decision. And I certainly would not, and if approving this policy means that I approve that solution, I'm not going to vote for it.
So I'll let Councillor before Councillor Kenny, Councillor Larson.
I mean, one of the first things I just want to point out where it's different from the last time is that change of the wording, which was the thing that we were basically sent away to do because of this biodiversity policy, not on the discussions about weed or pioneer plant control. But so we've actually changed the wording now to use, so it just says synthetic pesticides, because we got in a bit of a mess about man-made pesticides, about whether or not vinegar is man-made and all the rest of it. So I think that's clarified what we as a town are prepared to use for spraying and controlling weeds. I mean, as far as the weed control contract that we have with Cornwall Council, I mean, it's not, this is relatively relevant to this, but this is basically about how we as a town council treat our biosphere, our ecosystem, our land, our town. And whether or not we're prepared to get bogged down in the debates about control of some weeds in part of the town where the road sits the curbs. This is way, way bigger than anything to do with that. This is about increasing the town's biodiversity, which is our security, the benefits to ecotourism, just the benefits to everyone in town. And as far as the weed control contract goes, in my eyes, we were charging our taxpayers to do an extra service to look after the roads that they're already paying Cornwall Council to look after. So not only were we using destructive chemicals, we were actually spending taxpayers' money that they'd already spent for Cornwall Council, and we were double taxing them to do it again. Now, when we just turn around now, there was always a reliance that Cornwall Council would think, okay, fine, Newquay Town Council's doing this, So we don't have to. We don't have to look after our roads in this much. And you know, like we've turned around and said we're just not sticking to this contract anymore. We've still got in the ENF budget like a town enhancement budget line, and we can use that where we see fit. But we're not actually nailing ourselves down to a commitment to do something that, frankly, is Highways Department of Cornwall Council. And the guy that came in from the ENF meeting and was saying about how, you know, whatever terrible the verges were, and he said that he had a second home in Weybridge. He said, oh, in Weybridge, this isn't a problem at all. And then we know, because we visited Weybridge to find out how they got around the solution, and they said, we just told Cornwall Council we're not going to do it anymore. And that was it, and Cornwall Council do it. So we've got a town enhancement budget, but I think so that we can, if need be, we can step in where we want, but we're not committing to one particular thing. But what this is really about is about increasing biodiversity and saying that we as a town are not going to use synthetic pesticides or herbicides.
Unfortunately, what it's resulted in is the fact that you've given back the contract. I mean, at one point they paid us to do it. Did they stop paying us? I mean, that is the stage that we should have cancelled the contract.
Yes, exactly.
But we didn't.
So now it has
Took
been
on the
done.
responsibility. And now we've said, well, we don't want that responsibility anymore. And I just think the problem is that Cornwall Council have not stepped up and resolved in our tourist town. It makes a difference when people come in and see weeds in the streets. So I think it was carry on.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm going to struggle to support it as well, and it's not even what's in the diversity policy now that I'm struggling with. I mean, I don't like the fact it was item 10 that brought this to our attention in the first place. When it came initially as a policy, there were lots of good things in the policy that I could see. It was only item 10 that I focused in on, because when I saw item 10 in its original format, and that's not changed, it's still the same, it completely restricted, it tied our hands as to how we could control weeds on the curbside. And that concerned me because I know from past experience that if we don't have some method of control of the weeds on the curbside, whoever it belongs to, the detrimental effect it will have on a tourist town is beyond something that I would want to even imagine. Now, when this policy was introduced, the comments that Councillor Kenny made was that if we're going to stop using pesticides and herbicides, then we must have an alternative. And we went down the road a long way looking for an alternative. So I'm disappointed that that never materialised, and we are where we are. What makes me more frustrated than anything else is the way the process has gone. Because I always felt that because this policy was the driving factor that would eventually, if passed by full council, stop using glyphosate, I could accept that because that's the true democracy process. But what really disappoints me is that while this diversity policy has been trying to get to council with its delays and its alterations, the ENF committee has just blatantly decided itself that it's going to stop using pesticides and herbicides. So before the policy has been actually approved by full council, with item 10, which would then democratically mean that the council has decided it's not going to use pesticides and herbicides, the committee has just single-handedly decided not to renew that contract. And I'm on that committee and I voted against that all the time. And that committee has wasted hours and hours of officer time and committee time looking at various alternatives and decided now after all that it's not going to do anything at all. And this policy still hasn't been to full council. So in my opinion, this is just my honest opinion, that decision to stop spraying those curbsides and stop weed control completely of those curbsides has been made by a very small proportion of the full council. Now, I know that when it gets worse next year and the curbsides are a mess and everybody's complaining, because they will, the majority of the council have had no say in that decision at all. because the committee made the decision, didn't even wait for the council to approve the policy. This has still got to go to council. If council disagree with that policy, they may not, then the committee's decided to stop using herbicides and pesticides with the full council not agreeing with them. I'm not saying that will happen, and I was really disappointed when I brought that point up before, that it was glibly said that it will go through full council. Because obviously the people that are driving this policy forward feel that they've got such a good majority on the full council, they don't even have to wait for them to approve it. And I'm amazed that no rank and file councillor that's not had any say in this decision hasn't come forward up to this point and say, what is happening here? But we're going to vote on it. I'll vote against it again. I want a name vote again, because I don't want to be linked to this when we get all the complaints. Because you're sat there quite confident you're not going to get any. You're confident you haven't had any. But I can tell you for a fact, we'll get them. And when we get them, I don't want to be part of it.
Okay. Probably for myself, I need a bit of a clarification of process here. I think what you're trying to say is that you need full council to agree on a £7,000 contract through an E&F committee. I thought the point is the E&F committee agrees its own policies, and then a contract like that wouldn't normally go to full council, would it? Something so small. No, that's just what I thought. I'm not saying we've broken any rules. I'm not saying we've gone out of procedure. I'm not saying you've done anything wrong. I'm saying as a democratic. Oh, okay. All right. I'm disappointed that this is the way it's been put through. I'm not saying it's been done wrong. I'm not criticising anybody for doing it wrong. It's not how I would have liked the democratic process. And like I said before, and I say it again, I'm amazed that no councillors that have not had any input on this have not actually come forward and said, hang on a minute, I didn't vote to stop spraying. I haven't seen the policy yet. I haven't voted on the policy yet. This should have gone through full council first. And then, yeah, it should have gone through first. And then the committee would have a better steer from full council as to whether, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, so just to go back, I think two separate issues, biodiversity policy being one. The second issue is the one that you've brought up about the contract to manage Cornwall Council's road and spray it with glyphosate. It is fully within E&F's gift to cease contracts, to open up new contracts. And it should be noted that in the previous 3 incarnations of that discussion around the use of glyphosate to spray the road network, which belongs to Cornwall Council around Newquay, I and a number of other councillors voted against. Did we stand up after the fact and complain, meeting after meeting after meeting, that we had been outvoted? No, we accepted it was a democratic process and we got on with it. And we made the same arguments the following year and the following year. And it just happens to be that this year, the arguments have obviously landed better with the number of councillors and a majority of councillors on that committee agreed. But the issue that we're here talking about is biodiversity policy. And sorry, just one other point on Councillor Kenny, you were talking about Cornwall Council not managing the roads. It should be noted, Cornwall Council actively manage the road network in central Newquay. They choose to not manage the other areas of Newquay, such as Pentyre, such as Lusty Glaze, Treloggan, out towards Nansledden. They choose that. So, and I don't understand why they aren't managing the entire road network around Newquay. In fact, what was happening was they've got Biffa out scraping the sides of the roads in central Newquay for weeds because they don't use glyphosate. And there we are, merrily spraying glyphosate after them. So, the whole thing. But I'm going to propose that we, that the biodiversity passes as recommended to full council. I'll pass back to you, Councillor North.
Yeah. Yes, I'm going to make it absolutely clear. I don't disapprove of the policy, but I'm
telling you, this has taken over. I don't know how many meetings.
I understand
that.
But this is
Can I just say, it's about the policy. We're passing a policy here. We're not sort of passing whatever Cornwall Council should or shouldn't do.
The problem is the policy has resulted in us ceasing a service which was valued by the members of this town without really getting the alternative that we always asked for in the first place. And I feel this has affected the policy, so it's driven this decision by ENF without actually talking to Cornwall Council to see whether you could do a deal, whether they would give us money to do something like picking it up and scraping and not you Garrison. You've basically said, okay, we'll stop doing it. And as a result, the town's in a mess. So, and that is totally, to me, that is totally irresponsible. And I'm afraid it damages this policy, so I will be voting against it, not because the policy itself isn't good, but it's the fact the end result of pursuing this policy has been bad for the town.
But as stated by Councillor Creek, Cornwall Council do go round, Biffa goes round and they do all the edges of central Newquay. So they have chosen what spot they want to do. And in truth, they should do the whole of the area. I mean, Tower Road, they go up and down that 3 and 4 times a week, which takes the weeds away. So what I think we just need to do is move on to a vote, because we have discussed it at length. I don't know how many times we're going to run over.
Named,
Pardon?
vote is named.
Yeah, named vote. So I'm happy to propose. If you have a seconder, Councillor Larson, all in favour? Against? Thank you.